Great. Looks like a couple more people have joined. Thank you so much for joining us all this evening as we review the Sunset Tomorrow draft specific plan with you all. If you haven't already answered the poll, I think it just closed. We wanted to know, what your familiarity is with this project. So looks like from the results here, only 9% of you, this is the first time hearing about it. So that's great. A lot of you, about half and half, have either followed it somewhat on and off or been very involved in following it since the beginning. So welcome back. We're so glad that you've been following this process from the beginning, and really thank you for all your input. This is really a plan shaped by the community, and we're excited to share where we've been with you in the plan. A couple workshop logistics. All attendees' audio and video are off, and you will be invited to do a couple different Zoom polls like you just did throughout the presentation, where we'll stop and we'll give you a minute to answer a poll question, and then we'll review the answers with you. And as I mentioned before, we can answer questions through the Q&A icon at the bottom. At the very middle of your screen at the bottom, if you click Q&A, those will get sent to us, and periodically through the presentation, we'll be answering those. We have a lot of great content to get through. And we will answer those questions throughout the workshop. And just to let you know, this is one of many community engagement meetings, but there will be further opportunities for you to share feedback with the city in upcoming meetings. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or comments specifically about the EIR or the plan, please send them to Sunrise Mall Plan, citrusheights.net on the screen there. And all questions, just so you know, all questions in this whole workshop will be documented by the project team and answered and posted, as will a recording of this meeting on the website. And a little bit about the team. Forgot to introduce myself. My name is Midori Mizuhara. I'm with the Gensler team. The Gensler urban planning team has been hired by Citrus Heights, the city, and we have a whole host of team members and consultants that's helped us along the way craft this plan with you. MXD for economic market analysis, Fair and Peers for mobility analysis, Mark Thomas for civil engineering and infrastructure, and De Novo for environmental analysis. And a brief kind of agenda of what we'll be covering. First, we'll be going through an overall project update, where we are in the process over the timeline that we've started. And then, reflecting this past year and a half on COVID response and recovery, how the plan is responsive to recent trends and recent events with COVID. And then going through the draft specific plan overview chapter by chapter, just giving you a touch point of what the content is in each chapter. So when you review it on your own, you kind of know the framework. And then we'll be talking about next steps to conclude. And at this point, I'd love to pass it over to Chris Boyd, City Manager of Citrus Heights, to say a few words. Chris?
All right, well, thank you. Well, good evening and welcome. The City of Citrus Heights is truly excited to share information about the published draft specific plan tonight. I want to start by thanking the hundreds of community members, our various stakeholders, our city council members, who have all been engaged with the city, providing feedback and ideas for over a year now. I'm so proud of how our community as a whole has thought deeply and creatively on how to reimagine the heart of Citrus Heights. And I hope that tonight offers the opportunity to see just how committed our city is to making the vision for Sunrise Mall a reality. I also want to thank the team presenting tonight. The work that has gone into this specific plan draft is remarkable, and the feedback we've received from regional development experts is already so encouraging. Citrus Heights is a community that has always taken a very active role when it comes to civic engagement, and the efforts presented here tonight are a manifestation of our community's desire to steward in a brighter future. After countless hours of data crunching, synthesizing feedback, pivoting plans to adapt to COVID, and more, the specific plan outlined tonight ultimately offers the opportunity to redevelop the 100-acre mall site into something that is reflective of how residents, workers, and visitors want to live in the future. So thank you to everyone watching tonight, and I'll pass the mic and let the team dive in. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. So we're just going to kick it off with an overall project update. So the project purpose, just to review, is to create a specific plan to guide the development of the Sunrise Mall property. Secondly, to realize the city's general plan vision. And lastly, to transform the mall into a premier regional destination and flourishing center of community life where visitors and residents can live, work, and play and shop. And a little bit about the project history. As you all know, the Sunrise, Mall opening in the early 70s. Oh, sorry. Sunrise Mall opening in the early 70s, taking us to July of 2019 when the city adopts the general plan, requiring a comprehensive plan for the Sunrise Mall development. And then Gensler was brought on in late 2019 to work on this specific plan, taking us to 2020, pre-COVID, when we had the pleasure and privilege of sitting down with you all and sketching ideas and having this workshop together. And then, due to COVID, we switched largely 2020. All of our engagement was online and digital, still getting a really robust amount of feedback from you all. So thank you for that nimbleness and flexible feedback. And then that takes us to today, where we're really excited to share the draft specific plan with you all today. Just reiterating the kind of overall timeline of where we are, that black square in the bottom here. So we're at the refining moment in the timeline where we are looking over the draft specific plan, and the EIR is happening. And then our next move will be to review and approve and finalize that plan. And just wanted to reiterate and thank you again for all your feedback digitally, online, in person. It's been such a pleasure working with you all, and really making your vision and your ideas become a reality and a plan. And we couldn't have done this without each and every one of you giving your input from the very beginning. So this is really a collective vision, and this is your vision, and we're just really honored to be a part of it. And by the numbers, just looking at some of those engagement metrics, we had over 300 folks in that first community workshop, 54 stakeholder interviews, over 500 survey respondents, and on our website, over 12,700 website visits and comments on there too. So really have a wealth of great data from you all to work with in terms of shaping, refining, and fine-tuning this plan. And what we heard your priorities were the ones that really floated to the top and that ended up shaping the plan was, you all expressed a need and a want for a central public space, really important, a mix of retail, dining, and entertainment options, a hub of employment and job opportunities, a neighborhood with a mix of different housing typologies and housing types for a diverse city, safe connections into and around and through the property, financially feasible and implementable, and adaptable, flexible for the future. And just to conclude, one thing we heard in one of our workshops that really resonated with us and we kind of carried through this process was the mall used to reflect the pride of the community through its events, and we need to bring this back. This was the heart of the community. So that really stuck in all of our minds as we worked on this plan for the last year and a half. And now I'm going to pass it over to James to talk a bit about how this plan is responsive to our current circumstances.
Thank you, Midori. Hi, everybody. My name is James Dunsmore with Gensler. Sorry we can't be there with you in person tonight. We really enjoyed our opportunity to meet all of you last year when we had our first workshop. But obviously, COVID is a reality that we've all had to adapt to, and this plan is no different. I think it's no understatement to say that the pandemic has really changed how and where we shop, work, and live. And we've looked at some trends in that area and thought about how the plan can best strategize to respond to those and really to position Citrus Heights for success going forward. So the first trend is about retail. This is a mall after all. And what we've found, and I'm sure you may have seen this as well, is that COVID has really accelerated pre-pandemic trends towards online shopping and away from traditional malls. We've seen this in the news across the nation with headlines, talking about how malls were in decline before COVID and are having even greater challenges now. By some estimates, 25% of US malls may shut down within the next 5 years. And it's a challenge that many cities are facing and that Citrus Heights identified early. And the city, I think, really should be commended for the vision that the council has taken and the community has taken in identifying this as an issue and really being proactive. For Citrus Heights and Sunrise Mall, before COVID, the mall had a 40% vacancy rate as of January 2020. And over the previous decade, from 2008 to 2019, there was a 44% decline in visitor traffic and a 28% decline in taxable retail sales. So even before changes in how we shop, the mall had a lot of challenges, and that was the original reason for the city wanting to look at a plan for the site, and it remains an important consideration. So how are we strategizing around that? Really, the answer is about right-sizing the retail. And what the specific plan will do is allow the mall to be repurposed for other uses while maintaining space for neighborhood serving retail and really expanding opportunities for restaurants and dining. So the mall, will continue to be a destination for people to go and shop. Even greater focus on the types of shopping that people in the community need as residents come here, grocery stores and things like that, and lots of opportunities for eating and drinking.
Great, thanks, James. So this is another opportunity for a poll question, and we just wanted to stop and, given that this, given COVID, we wanted to ask, as California starts to reopen, we know it's an ongoing process. How would you characterize your shopping and dining preferences? Number one, will you want to stay or go back to mostly in person? Number two, do you imagine that it'll always remain a combination? Or three, do you feel really a lot more comfortable remaining mostly online? Just give everybody a minute or two to think through that.
And while we're waiting, I'll just remind everybody, if you do have questions, go ahead and type them in the Q&A, and as we have these pauses in the presentation, we'll be happy to answer some of those as we go through.
Great, thanks, James. And as everybody can see on the screen, looks like our poll 2 answers have largely come in, and overwhelmingly, it looks like a combination is what people will continue to feel comfortable with moving forward. And then second in place, mostly in person. So going back to that brick and mortar shopping and dining experience. So about 60%, looks like a combination, and about 20 to 30. Thanks for answering that.
Thanks, Midori. I think that that response really speaks to why it's important to have a plan for repositioning the mall. It's going to remain an important place for people in the community to go and shop and connect and get together for a long time to come. The second trend we're seeing is really about hybrid work and how people are working. And what we're finding is that hybrid work is really becoming the new normal. One thing that we've had, what we've seen during the pandemic is really the viability of remote work, and that a lot of workers have an expectation that they want flexibility in how and where they work. And Gensler has actually conducted surveys of the US workforce, and these results are from a workplace survey conducted last summer and fall, asking employees, not just Gensler employees, but US employees across the country, what kind of workplace do they envision in the future? And overwhelmingly, over half of people said that they envision working from home, either 1 or 2 days or 3 or 4 days, and working in the office part of the time. About a third of people said they anticipated working in the office full time, and about 20% said working at home full time. But overall, the majority said they envisioned a hybrid solution where they go into the workplace sometimes. And we think that shows that there's continued need for office space for the types of uses that are envisioned as part of the plan, but that they might need to change a little bit. And what we saw is in asking people what types of amenities they want in their workplace. Some of the most popular ones were amenities that support health and well-being. At the top of the list was help with technology, which makes a lot of sense. But some of the other trends, when you look at them, people wanted coffee and tea service, places to eat, sit down and dine, gyms and exercise rooms, outdoor space, which makes a lot of sense, healthcare on site, childcare services. And all of these are types of things that are actually envisioned in the plan for the types of employment uses that would be on the site. And that really speaks to the second strategy, which is all about enhancing the employment opportunities. The mall has always been a great place to shop, but it's also been a source of jobs in the city. And the site can continue to do that going forward. And that's, I think, one of the city's goals as well. So the specific plan supports job growth with office environments that meet the demand for new flexible workspaces and support growth in technology and healthcare industries, which are two of the fastest growing industries in the Sacramento region.
And our next survey question related to this is, we wanted to gauge how much do you anticipate, if you are employed, going back to the office? Will that be a 5-day-a-week back in the office, just like before? Will it be some sort of hybrid? We have a number of options in this survey to kind of dial in where do you think you will be, or will you remain remote, 5 days remote, or is it not applicable? Are you retired or do not work? I'll give people a couple minutes to answer this.
And while we're waiting, I saw a question in the chat asking how many people are on tonight's presentation. It looks like right now we have about 60 attendees. So thanks for everyone who came out and joined. And as Midori mentioned, this will be recorded and put on the website, sunrisetomorrow.net. So if you have friends or family who would like to see this information and couldn't make it tonight, it will definitely be available.
Great. So as you see the results here, really interesting. It looks like a pretty even spread across. So this is telling us the future of work is going to remain hybrid after COVID. Really interesting answers.
Yeah, it looks like just 14% say 5 days remote. So most of the people, I guess, are thinking that they'll be still going to a workplace at least once a week, with many people going in more than that. So I think that shows that it's still important to have plans that accommodate office and employment uses. Even though we're changing how we work, we're still going to need those places to come together. And finally, the third trend that we're seeing really relates to that second one, and it's all about smaller cities on the rise. Hybrid and remote work are allowing people to relocate from larger and expensive cities to smaller cities and suburbs that offer a higher quality of life. And this is definitely something we're seeing in the Sacramento area. So this is from another survey we conducted of people living in major urban areas, both in the US and around the world. And this was conducted just this year. And what we found is that over 1 in 3 remote workers were considering moving to a different city. And you can see in San Francisco, which was the nearest metro area that we surveyed, 32% of San Francisco residents said they were considering moving to other major cities. And when you look at it by kind of generation, what really stands out is that millennials, 51% said they're thinking about making a change and moving to a different city. So really high number in terms of people thinking about changing how they live and where they want to live. And when we ask people about that, what we found is overwhelmingly cities, smaller cities and suburbs are the most popular destination for those leaving larger cities. 69% of people said that they wanted to relocate to smaller, less populated locations. And maybe that makes sense to all of you living in Citrus Heights, because you know what a wonderful community it is, what a wonderful place it is to live. But what we're finding is that places like that are really desirable. And just looking at the state, we know in California, population growth has been slowing, but in the Sacramento region, it remains a top destination despite slowing growth statewide. The Sacramento region grew by 26,000 people in 2020, and that growth rate was 5 times the state average. And just looking at this graphic from the LA Times, you can see the map of the state, San Francisco, LA, some of these other urban areas colored in red, showing a decline in population, and in the Sacramento region, and particularly the foothills in Placer and the El Dorado counties just nearby, really popular destinations for growth. And that relates to what we're hearing anecdotally as well. As part of the project, we talked with a number of folks in the community, as well as leaders in the Sacramento region. One of those was Barry Broom, CEO of the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, to get kind of a perspective on the business community here. What he told us was he's anticipating over 500,000 people coming to the Sacramento region in the next 2 decades. But what's really needed is a coolness factor to attract them. Real vision is required. And that's what the plan aims to provide, is a vision for what the future of the community can be. Because we know people are looking to move, there's a need for housing, and how do we accommodate that in a way that's smart? And so the strategy is really providing new neighborhoods with a mix of housing and open space. And that's what the plan attempts to provide, with a variety of housing types, a range of open space amenities to meet the needs of all different kinds of residents and families. Both people who live in Citrus Heights today, who may want to relocate to a smaller home or just have another option, as well as people who may be coming here. And that's really one of the goals of the project, is creating a really well-balanced neighborhood.
Great, thanks, James. And that leads us to our third question about COVID trends. I think we've all, spent a lot of time at home. So as California reopens, what features of your neighborhood did you find that were really important to you during this last year and a half? Was it first walkable streets, shady, comfortable, safe? Or was it parks and open spaces within walking distance of your home? Or option 3, restaurants and shops within walking distance of your home? Or 4, community gathering spaces nearby? And you can check all that apply. This isn't I know a lot of us probably value a few of these, so it's not just a one-shot answer.
I saw a question in the Q&A about, will the video be posted on the website? Yes, a video of tonight's presentation, as well as the presentation itself, will be posted on the project website, sunrisetomorrow.net.
Thanks, James. And it looks like our answers have just come in. Looks like walkable shady streets won on that one, but a close second and third are parks and open space and restaurants and shops within walking distance. So those top three really valuable in this last year and a half. And maybe James, you want to talk about how that relates to the plan?
Well, the good news is that each of these aspects is incorporated in the plan, and that's what we'll talk about as we get into the next section, walking you through what's included in the plan. But the goal has been to create a community space with both walkable streets, lots of open space. Of course, as I mentioned, shops and restaurants. This will remain an important commercial district, and really providing community gathering spaces. To that quote that we started with from one of the community members about creating a heart for Citrus Heights. We know that this is a community, with a great sense of community, but there aren't always the places to get together, which we're really longing for as we're able to do that again, hopefully. So just to sum up before we jump into the plan itself, the Sunrise Tomorrow specific plan, is intended to respond to the changes in how and where we shop, live, and work, and really proactively position Citrus Heights for success over the next 2 decades. The truth is that we know there are changes. We've seen them, before. The mall is different today than it was a decade ago, and certainly different than it was when it opened, and that's okay. And what we have to do is just think about how do we want to shape that change, and the specific plan process is one tool that communities have to do that, which is why we think it's great that the city has taken this on, and that you all have been involved in this process since we've gone through it.
Great. Thanks, James. So at this portion, we're going to transition to start to review the plan with you. But before we jump into the actual content, just wanted to revisit what is the specific plan, and revisit, by definition, what this document means as a planning document for the city. It's first a set of guidelines and regulations to streamline and provide certainty for long-term future development. It's second, a proactive plan to mitigate the changing retail environment, and more recently, all the COVID trends that James just talked through. And third, a flexible framework. So this is, phased over a long period of time, but it's really in place to ensure the best possible outcome for the city, community, and mall owners. And this plan, this document, is available online for you all to look through in its entirety. If you go to sunrisetomorrow.net, you can view it online, and we'll give you a brief overview of what each is in each chapter briefly right now. But when you view it online, you can kind of understand what these 8 chapters entail. So first, introduction, vision, framework and policies, development standards, street design standards, open space standards. Then we'll talk about the infrastructure needed to support all those, and then next steps and implementation and how the plan is administered. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Nate Cherry to talk a bit about the introduction section of the plan. Nate?
Thanks, Midori, and it's a real pleasure to share the work that's been done up to date. And I must say, Citrus Heights has been an exemplary city to work in, and there's some basic fundamentals that I think are really important to talk about. Although the mall, when it opened, it was really cutting edge. It really has outlived its useful life. A lot of surface parking out there, a lot of buildings that are underutilized. But the thing about Citrus Heights that's always struck us is how independent it's been. It's always, it's been incorporated and thought independently for a long time. The strong sense of community is something that's always been a part of this effort, and so that creates a real opportunity to think about the future. And the city, the community has always been very results oriented. And so the result of that has really been co-authorship in a plan that I think has some of those key elements that you're talking about. I think the earlier poll, a couple polls ago, 71% said they wanted walkable streets. And so that's exactly what this plan represents. Several miles of really blocks and streets, which really break up that super block of 95 acres and turns it really into a city, a series of blocks and squares and green spaces that really connect into and through the existing fabric of the city. Several key elements. Number one, the main street, which goes through the center of the project. That's really a designed like a classic main street that you would see in a town, a traditional town, that really recaptures some of that traditional feel that Citrus Heights used to have. Number two is the Commons, which is really that sort of community living space, which becomes an anchor for community-oriented uses. So many people told us about the fireworks activities in the farmers market and other activities which happen on the site. Now you really have a space where that happens on a really formal and very legitimate level that is going to become a real anchor. Employment on one end, on the north side, on the south side, entertainment, including a full movie theater and other entertainment uses, business, hotel, retail interspersed throughout, and then residential neighborhoods which connect on the east side and then also around the commons of different residential typologies, 5 or 6 different residential typologies integrated into the plan, open spaces. And then really important to this is the use characteristics of these land uses allow for a dispersed traffic throughout the day. And also mitigating that traffic is connections to the transit center on the west side. Really important connection that goes all the way through the site. So really important transit mall, which is going to be on the west end of the site. And so the vision for the project, just to back up a little bit, it was always, people use this term heart all the time. The idea of the mall was the heart of the city, and really creating a new heart that expresses kind of the changes in the culture, the changes in our behaviors and the way we interact with each other. That's really what this is all about. Next slide, please. This is our vision statement. So really to transform the mall into 21st century Main Street, creating an economic engine and regional destination that creates a high quality of life, not only for the residents of this property, but for residents around all throughout the city, visitors who come to this area, and then also people who work here. So it really becomes effectively the main street, the 100% corner, the core of the city. That's the aspiration for this project. There are really sort of 5 big ideas, which are sort of the subcategories that deliver the goods on that vision. I'll talk about the first one and the last one, and then I'll get a little help on the other 3. The first one that people really talked about was, creating a big heart, a community and regional destination that not only appeals to locals, but also becomes a real activity center for people who are visiting or coming to Citrus Heights or staying. We talked about multi-generational families and so on. And so that's what this really represents. Citrus Commons, here you see this large community green of about 2 acres in size, a food hall at the end of the commons. In the foreground, an event tent which connects to transit, indoor outdoor dining, which allows a lot of choice and the ability to eat outside, and then residential uses that are above shops that look down into that community gathering space, and diversity of retail activities with the hotel in the distance. So we're really talking about classic all-American placemaking and a real heart for the community. That's what this is all about. Next slide. And another thing that we wanted to spend time thinking about was how could we sort of expand people's experience of downtown and what it offers. So on the top, you see the current events which happen in April, July, pretty much August, September, and December. You have, a variety, a smattering of events, which a total of about 100, 150 events in the current calendar. And then on the lower calendar, you see a real complement of events that really expand what you have. So we're talking about 250, potentially 300 events that occur throughout the year. Why is this important? This creates more and more reasons for people to come down on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, seasonal events, and then also major holiday events. And it really creates sort of a user behavior, it develops a muscle that people keep going back and back to downtown, and they really find it as a great community gathering space, not to mention the people who live there and the people who work there who are going to certainly benefit from those events too. But many people talked about this nostalgia about downtown and their real desire to see it become a hub once again. And this is part of how you do that. You create the space, you get the land uses around it, and then you create the events that bring people together. Finally, this just shows you how all those elements work together. So complement of retail, dining, and entertainment of over 300,000 square feet, 20 to 25 new restaurants. Many people talk to us over our time working on this about the importance of restaurants, many more events per year, and that creates visitors, that improves the tax base, and it creates energy in the downtown, and those chance meetings, the serendipity that real urban living offers, all of that potential is realized by creating that mix of land uses, public spaces, and event programming. And so that's what's really exciting about this plan in the first big idea. Second big idea, I'd like to pass to Midori.
Thanks, Nate. Second big idea we're calling Green Network, and as the life of this site has been covered by concrete for the last many decades, what does it mean to let nature back into the site? Shaded public areas that can be activated with great events, family-friendly plazas, verdant parks, shaded streets, really just having those natural systems into the site, a sustainable site throughout, offering new tree canopies along all the streets in the Main Street atmosphere, and a mixture of hardscaped plazas and green parks with lawns to play. A ton of different open spaces, but having nature really welcomed through the site for a sustainable lifestyle. And what are some of the metrics that come out of that? 25 acres of potential parks and green space, up to 30% of active open space on site, and 1.5 miles of potential multi-purpose paths. We're offering a green loop around the site, so for folks that live on the site can easily and safely walk around the site in a beautiful landscaped path. And that brings us to our third big idea, streets for people. How do we make all the streets and the block structure that Nate mentioned in this new village safe and accessible for all? So how do you feel comfortable walking with your kids, biking with your kids through the site, walking and biking throughout all the plazas and streets safely and enjoyably? It not only needs to be safe, but it needs to be interesting. There needs to be public artwork, captivating things to stop and do and see and smell along the way. We want to make this a really interesting and vibrant place to walk around and see new things and discover new things. So we're offering flexible streets that can be closed for events. If there's a community festival on Main Street, we can close that down and have a block party, sidewalk dining, diverse mixes of uses spilling onto those streets, cafe seating spilling out, making those streets interesting places to stop and talk to neighbors and meet new friends, shade trees and wide sidewalks, just to make being a pedestrian comfortable, enjoyable, and fun. And some of the metrics that come out of the streets concept, quarter of the projected trips are walking or biking or internal. Over 80% of the site was within a 5-minute walk of transit, which is great. We have a park once strategy. So if you park on the site, you can really walk and circulate through the whole site by foot comfortably. Again, those shaded trees, those safe streets, those wide sidewalks make that possible. and 30% savings in number of parking spaces with that shared parking strategy. And the second to last big idea, number 4, is we're calling livable neighborhoods. So how do we create a place that your family can live, and just a holistic neighborhood that really offers you all the things that you're looking for in a walkable distance. And this is just a view of one of those neighborhoods. But, as we mentioned before, we have a variety of different housing typologies for every demographic, mixed use lifestyle from different densities for different demographics, active adult, townhomes. So depending on what phase of life you might be in, what you're looking for in housing, there's a wide variety for a diverse, set of residents here. And then that leads us to our last big idea, economic engine. I'm going to turn it over to Nate again.
Yeah, thank you, Midori. So, this is all great, but the question arises, how is this all going to be paid for? And what are going to be those big economic levers that are going to be pulled in order to make that all happen? One of the things that's really important to understand is what's happening in the Sacramento region. There's so much growth with millennials moving to the area, empty nesters and second home buyers who are interested in Sacramento as a lifestyle play, many economic sectors that are really interested in the area, biotech, the service sector, construction, design and advertising. There are a lot of different entities that are moving and really interested in Sacramento. And so the question is, how is Citrus Heights going to get more than its fair share of that economic piece of the pie? And the way it does that is really by creating compelling urban spaces that attract creative businesses and industries that focus on collaboration. And that's really what the design of, for example, this corporate office piece really offers. Is at the end of the main street, it incorporates creative office space, an adjacent hotel and food and dining and terraces that look out over Main Street, a walkable and connected environment that has a beautiful streetscape, public spaces, public artwork and events, and then immediately adjacent housing, affordable housing for workforce, market rate housing that accommodates a variety of different lifestyles and different ways of working, people who want to work from home, who want to be in a creative environment. And so that really helps to attract those core industries that we're talking about. And the results of this strategy can be seen in the next slide, where we see we're attracting an incredible amount of economic growth, $1.1 billion of gross business revenue attracted to the site over the next 20 years. Almost 900,000 square feet of office space, projected annual construction jobs of 350 plus, and over 2,000 permanent jobs on the site that would be created both as a result of the construction, but also long-term permanent jobs on the site. So you have direct, indirect, and induced jobs of over 3,500 projected total jobs. So what you really have here is an incredible economic engine that's going to help pay for and subsidize all those great lifestyle elements that everybody wants to see on the site. And that's really important. And so how do you do that? You do that through creating great places. And so this just shows sort of the plumbing of how that gets done. So integrating land uses that create great public spaces, great placemaking, and then event programming within those places that create all kinds of reasons for people to come here throughout the week, during the evening hours, and during the weekend. You're really creating a community heart that not only creates an economic engine, but also improves the quality of life for everybody associated with this project. Next slide.
Thanks, Nate. And as you can see, Nate and I just covered a lot of content. So we want to take a pause here, take a breather. If there are any questions that came to mind as we were going through this, please type them in the Q&A and we will have time to answer a couple. And then the ones we don't have time to answer now, we'll put on the website. And there is a question about some real implementations of this type of project in the past. Casey, do you want to answer that one?
Sure, yeah, maybe Nate can chime in as well. There is malls all over the country, as we said, that have been going through a renaissance. And there's examples in California that Gensler has worked on and brought some of those lessons learned here. Locally, the closest example we have is near Newark. They are undergoing a similar process and they're a little bit ahead of us, but they have big plans for their mall there. And Nate, can you chime in on a couple others that you guys have worked on?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, the ones that come to mind are Santana Row in San Jose, Bethesda Row in outside Washington, D.C. We're working on the marketplace in the west part of LA where Google is relocating. 3rd Street Promenade has a variety of shops and restaurants that are going to an open air format where there used to be inside an enclosed mall. So it's really happening all throughout the country, and there are lots of different ways to do this. And the exciting thing is it really unleashes and unlocks the economic potential of the city, not only as a retail destination, but really in terms of quality of life. And it really has a virtuous cycle where it improves the lifestyle, promotes the economy, and creates more residents and population in downtown, which helps your local businesses do better.
Great, thanks, Nate. There's another question about the project schedule. And I'm wondering if maybe somebody from the city, either Casey or maybe James, if you want to answer that overall.
Sure, I can handle that.
Yep.
Yeah, so the project, this first step is to have the specific plan considered by our elected officials, which is our city council. And that will happen probably later this year. And then once that's done and the plan and the EIR adopted, the development community can begin submitting applications to start construction. It is a lot of square footage of buildings and a big site, so we do anticipate that it will take time to do that. It could take as a number of years. It could happen all at once. It really depends on the market demand and what happens, but we've set up flexibility in the plan to make sure that it's implementable and flexible to adapt over time if it does take a little bit longer.
Great, thanks, Casey. I see another interesting question about the green spaces, the green network that I covered. You know, this question says they love the idea of making green verdant areas throughout the design and site. However, worried about our current water situation in the state, which is a very valid concern. I don't know if anybody wants to answer that. I'll chime in and say that, you know, when the landscape is more deeply considered for this, I think we would obviously want to lean on drought tolerant native plantings as much as possible. You know, be very smart about how we reclaim stormwater management and those kind of sustainability practices that use as little water as possible to keep the site as green as possible, and also recycle and reuse water on the site. But James, do you want to speak to that, or Nate?
Sure, thanks, Midori. We'll actually get into infrastructure in a little bit. As part of the specific plan process, the city is required to look at the demand that the site will create for both for water, electricity, and as well as the sewer, solid waste, all of those aspects. So we've actually looked at that and calculated it, and some of that analysis is included in the AIR. So I would encourage people to look at that document as well.
Yeah, I would just add to it. I think part of the issue is there are net benefits to adding tree canopy. It lowers the ambient temperature. It lowers, it reduces heat island effect, and really by slowing the water down, the runoff of the water down on the site and creating bioswales which capture that water, we can really do a much better job of growing plants with the water that we have, instead of creating, a huge demand for additional water. So there are ways we can do that really have other environmental benefits beyond, reducing water usage. There are cumulative benefits to using indigenous plant types and capturing the water on site, using it to water the landscape.
Great. Yep, lots of strategies to work with as we dive deeper. I don't know if Casey, did you want to address any other questions
Sure,
live, or
yeah,
should we move on?
we do one more. There's a question here about how do you propose to create a safe way for pedestrians to navigate the west side where public transit is located along Sunrise Boulevard? That's a great question. We thought about transit very heavily. This plan does propose relocating the transit center from Arcadia over to Sunrise Boulevard. It's a very unique plan that allows buses to be front and center on the site and also close to Birdcage. There is a new signal proposed that will connect Sunrise Mall to Birdcage more closely, not having to walk so far between signals and making those block links a lot shorter. So that'll enable transit from both Sunrise Mall and Birdcage to have quicker and easier access to transit.
The other thing I would say is we're bringing the pedestrian and cycling experience inboard of the property, so off of Sunrise, which makes it much safer. You're in a pedestrian protected area. And so the interaction with the cars is not going to be the same as it was now. It's going to be much improved with a landscape buffer and tree canopy that's much cooler and safer than it is now.
Great, thank you. I see one more question for Casey about considerations to the potential impact on surrounding neighborhoods. Did you want to address that?
Yeah, so as part of this project, we are doing an environmental impact report that looks at all different aspects of potential impacts on the environment. So that is available on our website. You're welcome to take a look at that. We have heard from the community that a big concern and questions about traffic, and we've really done a very diligent deep dive into making traffic flow smooth along our major corridors. And we will have a slide on that in a little bit to tell you more all about that.
Great, and maybe one last question for Casey. Sorry, Casey, I'm just piling these up on you. About the ownership of the mall. Do you want to address that? Who owns the mall?
We have engaged ownership from day one, and they all are involved in the planning process, and they're excited to see what comes out of this process. They all have different degrees of interest and experience in the development world. And one of our key tenets is connecting them with those that are familiar with the development world. So we work closely with the owners to connect them to developers who are adept at developing projects such as this nature.
Great, thank you. And if there's any other questions, I think other remaining questions we'll answer and post, but maybe we should move on to the third section. James?
Thanks, Midori. Hopefully these next chapters of the presentation will help to address some of those questions that have come up. I kind of think of the first part of the document as the what part. What do we want to achieve? What will it look like when we're done? And then these next sections on the framework and policy, development standards, street standards, these are all the how questions. How will it work? How will we make sure that we're having the right amount of development? How will we provide enough water and infrastructure? So that's what this section is all about. And it starts with this overall planning framework. And one of the things you'll see here is that it is such a large site. And so to have a more careful consideration of each of the different areas, we're actually going to be looking at it as 6 different, what we're calling planning areas. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One is, as Casey was just mentioning, there are multiple owners on the site, and the property itself actually is comprised of multiple different legal parcels. So these different planning areas correspond to the different parcels, but also the character of the site is different. So what types of uses and activities that might occur in the planning area 2 The beige area here in the center that's closest to Sunrise Boulevard and is most active, those might be really different than what happens in planning area 4, which is in the kind of back corner of the site adjacent to the existing residential neighborhoods. And there's a real need to look at each of these sites individually and really craft the rules and regulations to be sensitive to the context. And hopefully that will help address that question we had about neighbor concerns. We'll talk a little more about that. In terms of what's actually going to be allowed to be built on the site, that's one of the things that the specific plan will govern. The plan will set a maximum development allowance, both for each of these planning areas and for the site overall, and will set development allowances by use. So there'll be a fixed number of residential units that are allowed, a fixed number of hotel rooms, retail, office, and community institutional spaces. The plan does allow flexibility so that, for example, if there's less demand for office or hotel in the future and more demand for residential, there can be some shifting of uses within a specified framework. But if you'd like to see this in more detail, you can check out the plan document itself on the website and delve into all the metrics for each of the planning areas. One of the other things established in the plan framework are some of the overall policies and requirements across the site for things like land use and the types of uses that will be allowed on the site, as well as for things like mobility, setting up overall site-wide strategy for how people will move around with sidewalks, pedestrian paseos, the green loop that will connect all around, and transit. So this chapter includes both these plans, as well as a wide range of policies that speak to the different things the city wants to see as the site is developed. So you can take a look at this chapter of the document, and it actually does have a specific policy on minimizing impacts to the surrounding community by doing things like requiring a greater setback adjacent to the southern edge of the site, where there are residential, existing residential units and people's houses close by, requiring things like sound walls and noise mitigation in those places. So all of that's included in chapter 3 of the plan, which covers policies and framework. Then going a little deeper into detail, chapter 4 includes the development standards, and this is organized for each specific planning area. So take, for example, planning area 2, right at the center of the site with Main Street and the Sunrise Commons. For each of these planning areas, you'll see a little description in here, talks about what is the intended character of this planning area. In this case, planning area 2 is really envisioned as the mixed use core of the site, the area with the highest level of activity, the greatest intensity of development. You can see the summary of the development allowance for this area and an illustrative plan that shows how the development might occur in the future. Going into a little more detail, each of these sub areas, planning areas, is broken up into sub areas. For example, we're looking at the sub area that covers Main Street. You'll see the description of the character that's desired to be established, precedent images showing the types of development and the types of uses and activities that are envisioned, as well as a 3D diagram showing potential development with a description of some of the key elements that the city would want to see when a proposal came forward for development in this area. Along with these requirements, we have things like height requirements, setback requirements. So for each development site within the plan, there's an established height limit. In some cases, both a minimum and maximum number of floors. And in general, the height, greater heights are allowed as you get towards the center of the site, and lower heights are allowed as you get towards the eastern and west southern edges of the site, closer to the existing residential neighborhoods. This also includes setback requirements, both from the internal streets, from the internal public spaces, as well as setbacks from the adjacent property lines. And finally, as part of this chapter of the plan, there's a use table that details for each development site within the plan all the types of uses that are allowed. So you can look at a particular parcel here and see, for example, would this place be allowed to have a restaurant, or would it be allowed to have an office building? This shows the types of things that could occur. And just like the city's overall zoning, includes things that are both permitted outright and things that require a little greater level of review with a minor use permit or special regulations for some types of uses like those serving alcohol.
Thanks, James. And continuing along the chapters of standards, chapter 5 describes street standards. So to create this walkable, small scale block structure that is, easily able to be navigated by foot or bike, we have a number of different types of streets, different street typologies, from the main street to a parkway to primary streets and secondary streets. So that just means that different streets have different intensities, and maybe some are a little bit higher traffic, some are more quiet. So as you see, the color coded overall map outlines the types. And then in the pages of street standards, we go through, just like James's development standards, how wide is that street? How are the street trees being treated? What is the character of that street? Some precedent images to give you an idea of what that street might look and feel like. And then a plan and section on the right-hand page to give you some dimensions and a little bit more detail. And chapter 6 does the same kind of thing with all the open spaces. So as we talked about, this green network of open spaces throughout the site, of trails, parks, plazas, small intimate green spaces to large community spaces with big, events. So as you can see on the left, there's many different types of open spaces being proposed in this network, and all being tied together by this green loop. You can see on the outside that dark green line. So this chapter really outlines, what does each one of those spaces feel like? And in the next page, you can go through the plan and see what each open space kind of will look and feel like, and the materiality, if it's hardscaped or green space, what kind of amenities might be in that space. Is there, does it open to restaurants? Is it more of a quiet space, a more active space? So you can really get an idea of what each of these parks and plazas will feel like and look like. And I know that was a lot of content. Chapters 3, 4, and 5 really speak about standards from development to open space to streets. Are there any questions? If you want to just click the Q&A tab at the bottom about standards in general, or the framework policies that James went over. We'll give it a couple minutes. I don't see any specific.
I don't see any specific to these chapters at this point.
Yep, and that's fine. We can move on. If you do think of something, type it in the Q&A and we can answer it at a later time as well.
Great. Now we're coming to some of the most exciting parts of the plan: infrastructure and implementation. These are really the guts of the plan, what makes it work, and what makes how can we be sure that the plan is going to be successful. So in terms of infrastructure, as we mentioned at the start, we have a civil engineer as part of our project team, and we've actually looked at each of the different utility systems on the site, from water, sewer, storm drains, electrical, telecommunications, and gas, to understand what is the existing capacity on the site, and then calculate what is the projected demand with the full build out of development, and to really plan and ensure that there'll be adequate provision of all utilities, in addition to other public services. So this chapter really goes into detail on each of those systems, and you'll be able to see a description of existing conditions, the proposed conditions, other considerations, and for each of these utilities, calculations of the projected demand. And as part of this process, we've worked and reached out to each of the different utility providers to make sure that there's going to be adequate capacity for the development on the site. So working with the water district, the sewer district, the electric utility, a PG&E for gas, to really understand and make sure that there will be adequate provision of resources for all the development on the site, and that it fits within their overall plans for development. And then finally, the last chapter is about implementation and administration, kind of what are the rules for how the city will use the plan, how it will be adopted, and how it will be carried out. This also covers and includes the phasing plan. And as we mentioned, this is really envisioned as a long-term strategy for the city, 20 years or more potentially. And development won't all occur at once. We're envisioning that it will occur in multiple phases as the mall site is redeveloped and changed. So you can see here one example of how phasing might work. What we're anticipating in phase one, in the first 5 years or so of the plan, is really things that are ready to go today. So what does that mean? It's really redevelopment of some of the parking areas because there's not an existing business that would be displaced or an existing lease that would have to be addressed before that could be redeveloped. And in particular, we envision the site where Sears formerly was as a real opportunity zone for development in phase one, because that store isn't currently operating. So that could be redeveloped with relatively minimal impact to the rest of the site. And then as you go through future phases, we'd envision the employment anchor coming online, more housing, mixed-use Main Street in later phases, and finally, potentially the redevelopment of the existing anchor retail stores, the Macy's and JCPenney's. Excuse me. This chapter also talks about some of the potential implementation tools that could be used for really how is the city going to encourage development and make it happen. Projects like this are complex and require a lot of coordination in order to be carried out successfully. And one of the first pieces is streamlined regulation. And that's really what the plan is all about. It's creating a set of rules that is clear for everyone, so the city knows what's expected, developers and the mall owners know what the rules are for them, and really the city and community members can know what types of things will be allowed and what's going to happen. Catalytic projects are those types of things that come online in early phases and really jumpstart the overall development. That could include things like some of the open space or transit center, things that will be a destination and really draw people there and support some of the other types of businesses. There are lots of different ways that these projects are financed, particularly the infrastructure. So there could be potentially grants or other funding mechanisms to help the city build some of the infrastructure. Some of this will be privately financed. There may be some that's public or public-private partnerships, partnerships with other agencies, including RT, Regional Transit, for some of the transit improvements. And then we're looking at ways to reduce the cost throughout the project. And one of those is really just this plan process itself, figuring out everything at the onset so that we have a good understanding of what will be required going forward. And especially looking at things like infrastructure, good planning on the forefront can help avoid issues later on. And then thinking about some of the potential economic impact, Nate mentioned some of these figures before, but there's potentially a huge impact for both the community in terms of jobs, visitors, economic activity, as well as potentially the tax revenue that would come into the city. That's a real important source of revenue for the city. It helps the city be independent. And over the years, as we showed, the mall has been declining in terms of sales, and that means less revenue for the city, less revenue to support police and parks and all the other great services. And so we want to have development here that's going to attract people from other communities to spend money and put money in the coffers, as well as for people living in Citrus Heights to spend money locally and not have to go to Roseville or somewhere else to have a great experience. And finally, as Casey mentioned, as required by state law, the city has prepared an environmental impact report that evaluates potential impacts, including aesthetics, traffic, noise, energy, water quality, air quality, greenhouse gases, public services, utilities, and others. And that's available online now at the city's website for you to review. And if you have questions or comments about this specific plan, please email the city at the web address we provided. The comment period is open now. And we know one of those topics that's of greatest concern is traffic. So we have John Gard, a traffic expert on the call to talk a little bit about the traffic analysis that was performed and some of the improvements that will help mitigate the impacts. John?
Yes, thank you, James. Again, I'm John Gard with Fair and Peers, and the draft EIR does include a thorough evaluation of the project's effects on the transportation system. And I'm just going to spend a minute or two going over this slide and specifically getting into a little bit of detail over the proposed project and thinking about, as it redevelops from existing Sunrise Mall, clearly it's going to result in a mixed-use center with employment uses, which will activate the area during the morning peak hours. So it's going to feel a little bit busier. It'll feel considerably more busy than Sunrise Mall, which is unoccupied and basically pretty empty in the morning. During the evening peak, once the project reaches build out, it will be marginally busier than Sunrise Mall when it was operating at its full capacity. The draft EIR discusses a variety of planned street improvements that would be constructed in conjunction with the project. This includes added capacity at the Sunrise Greenback intersection, major intersection in the corner of the site, as you can see. As was mentioned before, a new traffic signal along Sunrise Boulevard, which would be important as it will better distribute the traffic load. And the existing traffic lights that exist along Sunrise and Greenback, those lights will be improved as well to provide improved access for bikes, for pedestrians, and for vehicles to allow them to operate more efficiently through improved what we call signal phasing. The side streets work more efficiently. The project also includes a variety of multimodal improvements. And by multimodal, what we're talking about are bicycle, pedestrian, and transit. We've heard a lot about that, so I won't talk too much about the bicycle and pedestrian. But on the transit side, the on-site transit center includes dedicated bus pullouts. It includes passenger loading areas. It will result in a much improved condition over the existing Arcadia Drive Transfer Center. It'll also allow ultimately increased levels of bus service to occur on Sunrise Boulevard, as that's some of the region's long-range plans. The project also includes priority bus-only lanes, as well as transit signal priority. And these are the types of improvements that encourage bus ridership, and they're also aligned with state policies for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And the bicycle pedestrian facilities, again, focusing on improving the environment for bicyclists, for pedestrians through leading pedestrian intervals and things like that. Dory talked a little bit about shared parking. That's another big aspect that this project, despite having more square footage on the site, doesn't provide any more parking than Sunrise Mall. So that's a quick overview. And with that, I'll turn it back to Midori or James. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Great overview. And if people have more questions, I'd encourage them to email sunrisemallplan@citrusheights.net for any plans or questions or comments about traffic or any of the other environmental concerns. So I'll turn it over now to Nate to talk about some of the final takeaways from the project.
Yeah, thanks, James. I mean, I think the most important thing is, if we're talking to city council members or just over the kitchen table, we need to ask ourselves, why are we going to all this trouble and what are the benefits of a plan like this? And I think there's 7 really key ones to think about. One is the project just generates a ton of jobs, and that's direct jobs through construction, indirect jobs through people who provide goods and services to the people building the stuff and who work in the buildings and so on. And then there's induced jobs, which are jobs related to the project itself that create employment. So it's just a very diverse project that has a lot of short-term, mid-term, and long-term job creators that I think is good for Citrus Heights and really not only replace the mall, but I think will supersede what the mall ever did in terms of creating a tax base for the city. There's also a tremendous mix of housing. We talked a little bit of that for at least 4 different housing typologies that really fill in the missing middle or the gap of housing types. And many people have come up to us and talked to us about affordability being really an issue, and the ability to have housing that can accommodate their kids or their parents. And so I think this plan really addresses that need. I think one other thing that's been very impressive to me in talking to the community is it positions the city for the future. And most residents, I would say, are very future oriented and positive about the future. And so I think this is a positive act that really positions the city very well and leverages what's happening in the Sacramento region for Citrus Heights to get more than its fair share of that economic uplift. There are a lot of amenities, parks, open spaces, trails, event programming, all of those things improve lifestyle, increase the value of your house, and put Citrus Heights on the map as a great place to be. There's also, interestingly, a rural to urban open space network. What do we mean by that? There's actually, in the plan, there's agricultural uses integrated into it all the way into tight urban spaces and streets. And so you get this tremendous diversity that really in microcosm represents what the Citrus Heights area, specifically in Sacramento generally, represents, is this rural to urban interface on a plan within Citrus Heights. Really exciting. Lots of ways to get around beyond just driving. So walkable, bikeable, scooterable, transitable options that really create a lot of diversity and a lot of options for people. And probably the most important thing is, and you saw the numbers earlier by Midori, we have just had a tremendous response and a tremendous commitment by this community to help us design this project. So it's really co-authored. It's not designed by us. It's been designed by the community. That's the most important thing. When the community comes together and thinks creatively and collectively about what they want to be, what they want this area to be, that's a really heartening sign, exciting sign. And I think that's something we should all feel really good about.
Great, thanks, Nate. And so just wanted to pause here. Did anybody have any questions? If they want to put them in the Q&A box about those last two chapters, or we could open it up to the whole draft specific plan that Nate, James, and I went through an overview of. So we can wait a couple minutes, or Casey,
I
do you
do
have
see a question about why will it take 20 years to complete this project? And I think that's a great valid question. It's a 100-acre site. It's huge. There's a lot of moving pieces and infrastructure involved to make this happen. It's also a substantial financial investment for developers. So their first step is to get the specific plan done. That's what unlocks the property to its full potential. And then at that point, it would open up to developers to come and build as much or as little as they want at any given time. So this is really the first step, and we will continue to market the site to developers that are interested in doing business here in Citrus Heights.
Great, thanks, Casey. And as we wait for other questions, just wanted to congratulate the city again on the timing of your choice of doing this project. You started it before COVID, but it's just, as James went through all those COVID trends, it's just so relevant right now, making this move and being so proactive about the future of this site.
I saw one question in the Q&A, I think got responded to, but maybe it's worth bringing up, is kind of, asking about who is the plan for? Because, we have talked about jobs, we've talked about, some of the industries that are moving up here, tech and healthcare, and also how people are moving to the region. But I don't want to leave the impression that this plan is really for people who are moving to Citrus Heights, because, the project started with the community, and we've had a tremendous amount of outreach and impact from people here. And the hope is that it's delivering a lot of benefits for people here in the city, with things that we don't have today or that we'd like to have more of, with restaurants, places to go and eat, parks and trails to kind of go around on, types of events, as well as housing and some, office, new jobs and opportunities, some things we don't have, and hotels, which there aren't many of in Citrus Heights. So it's really designed to provide benefits for both the community that's here today, the broader region, because the mall has always served people from all around Sacramento, and really position the city for the future. And when we talk about 20-year build out, it's not so much that the plan will take 20 years to complete, but that we're trying to think 2 decades into the future and really be proactive so that this plan can last a long time, and that will be able to guide future development for many years without having to be modified or updated with additional analysis, hopefully because of the flexibility that's there.
Hey, James, we have a couple of questions about how the specific plan relates to the general plan, and I can take that. The general plan is the vision for the entire city, and this is a very focused on specifically the Sunrise Mall site. The general plan does have a policy that directed this plan, and it said you should make the Sunrise Mall site an exciting place to come workshop, live, and play. And so this plan is what is the key to making that happen. So that's answering Jackie's question.
I love that question. That comes like straight out of planning class 101. How does a specific plan relate to a general plan? Other questions that we can answer?
There's a question from Trish. Is the current owner of the property going to proceed with its development after everything's approved? And the answer is it depends. There is a number of owners. They all have different degrees of familiarity with development and interest moving forward. But we can tell you there is a lot of interest in development of the site, both from the property owners as well as the development community at large.
And there was one other question from Jacqueline. Are the big ideas of the specific plan reflected in the current plan or the next update? Maybe I'll hand that over to Nate. The 5 big ideas that Nate and I went through are reflected in the plan, but Nate, do you want to speak a little bit more about that?
Well, I think they generally represent where the community is going in terms of accommodating transit, more open spaces, and more community-oriented uses. The general plan update itself, though, I think is a Casey question.
Sure.
That he probably should answer.
Sure. Yeah. So many of you know the city's 98% built out. So what that means is we don't have a lot of land left, and what we do have, we want to make sure is planned in a really comprehensive manner. So this site is the single biggest redevelopment opportunity in the city. So that's why our city council took these big steps to make sure that it was well thought out and planned for. We do have some policies that are similar to this in our general plan that apply elsewhere in the city. However, just due to the limited amount of development potential there, we don't see as much of that. So really, this is our biggest opportunity to change the community and create economic development opportunities for the city and the region.
All right, well, it looks like we've hopefully answered most of the questions. If there are more that you have, we certainly encourage you to email them to the city, and we'll be happy to get back with responses and document all of those. And I know we've covered a lot of material here tonight and fairly quickly. So if you'd like to look at any of this in more detail, please visit the website and you'll be able to see all the material we presented tonight. As well as all the previous presentations and community outreach on the plan to date. So with that, we'll talk a little bit about the next steps, and I'll turn this over to Casey.
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, we are really thankful for the community and their contribution to putting this plan together. This is not the last step. This is really an introductory to what the plan is, and we certainly encourage you to go home and read it and check it out. And you can email comments about the plan to sunrisemallplan@citrusheights.net, or you can write us a letter or stop by City Hall if you'd like and learn more about it. So there is going to be a few more actual public hearings that occur in the fall and winter. The Planning Commission will review it in a very comprehensive manner, more deep dive than this. And then the Planning Commission and City Council will ultimately review this plan and the EIR together as it moves forward later this year, fall or winter of this year. So we should be all wrapped up before the new year. And again, I just like to encourage folks to take a look at it. If you have questions or comments, reach out to us. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes our presentation this evening. We really appreciate you joining us virtually. Hopefully we'll be back together again soon. But really, thanks a lot for all the outreach throughout the project. It's been really a pleasure working with everyone in Citrus Heights and on this great project. And hopefully it reflects some of the things you'd like to see in your community. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.